Everybody ready? All right, camera speeding, and action. Jeromy.
Yes.
Jeromy Felts.
Here we are.
You are known as Tip.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Matt Hewer told me that.
Yes.
I mean, is it just the obvious reason?
Well, it depends on if you know what it is. It's obvious once I tell people where it came from and what it means.
Uh-huh.
I started my career in broadcast and I was doing radio. And one of the people I was working with was like, I just don't like saying Jeromy on the radio.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't really understand. I don't know why.
I don't understand either.
He's like, so I think that we need to give you a nickname. And I'm like, okay, what is it? He's like, we're going to call you Tip. I'm like, okay, why Tip? It's like, well, your last name is Felts.
Yeah.
Like a felt tip pin.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I always get the question, where does Tip come from? And then I tell them, goes with the last name. Suddenly the light bulb goes on above their head. Oh, that makes sense. So it was given to me at the age of 16, and it's
16.
16.
Wow.
My first radio gig, and it's stuck with me for over 30 years.
Wow. It's 16. Oh my God. So that's a legit nickname. Like this doesn't pop out of the blue. This is like you're half most of your life you've been Tip.
For most of my life, but I have Tip. If I hear Jeromy, sometimes I think, I must have done something wrong. Someone I don't want to talk to.
Really?
But
do the boys call you Tip? And I just never noticed it. It
really depends, especially here in Vegas after I relocated from Seattle. In Seattle, Tip was who I was.
Yeah.
But I come here to Vegas and I'm wearing a badge and it says Jeromy. And so it's always kind of weird and interesting because with our 3-point guys on headset, Matt Hewer, Pat and the gang, I'm Tip.
Yeah.
And so they'll be on headset and talking to Tip on headset. Meanwhile, all you guys on camera and the people around are like, who's that? It's like, yeah, that's me.
It just went right by me. I never even picked up on it until I was sitting with Matt, and he's like, who, Tip? And I'm like, who? Mm-hmm. Who are you talking about? And he's like, oh yeah, Jeromy Felts. I'm like, oh shit, because I put it together right then. But wow, okay, so that's very interesting. So that comes from the past. I love that. So all right. So I have to ask you what your sign is.
Aries.
You're an Aries.
Yes.
You know what? Aries, very special people.
Mm-hmm.
My life was saved by an Aries.
Really?
That's a true story. Yeah. My life was saved by an Aries. I always weirdly bonded with Aries. Not sure why. Couldn't tell you why. But very passionate people.
Yeah.
Very passionate people. Love what they do. Kind of like people on a journey. Would you say you're on a journey?
I always have been. Yes, I totally would agree with that. I've never been one for settling down and being happy with what I am doing or where I am going. I've always been, well, what's the next step? Where are we going next? So life, I've just never been one for just being happy with where I am. There's always some place to go after that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm very much the same way. It's a curse, actually, because
it can be.
Sometimes you just like I'd like to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And then you're like, but it's like that voice in the back of your mind's like, no, you gotta keep going.
Yeah,
you have to keep going.
Yep.
So, 16, working in the radio. Was it a hip hop station?
It was a 5,000 watt news and sort of adult contemporary radio station.
Okay.
We're talking about I think I started in 1990, and I would go home during high school. I would go home, and my parents had this really old-fashioned radio in the living room. So I would get off the bus, I would sit in the living room, I would play on I think the Super Nintendo was the thing at the moment.
Hell yeah.
And it only picked up one radio station on this old radio. So I'd just listen to that radio station and play video games. And
what was your game, if you don't mind my interruption?
I really liked it was Nintendo, so I was into the Mario. I was into
Super
the
Mario
Donkey
World.
Kong and
Donkey Kong
stuff
Country.
like that.
Okay, I think that was 94. It was Donkey Kong Country.
So it was just Nintendo was just getting the ball rolling. But at the same time, I also had what was called a ColecoVision.
I remember ColecoVision.
Would play like Q*bert and all these old arcade
Q*bert
style video games. And so I was into the gaming in the early days of gaming. And so I would go home and play, and I would listen to the radio. And one day I was like, well, I wonder what's going on there. I want to know what they're doing in that building and how it's coming out of my radio. So I sent the guy that was the afternoon show host a letter. And this was back when we sent letters.
Yeah, you sent a letter, yeah.
Had to get the envelope, put the stamp on it, put it in the mail. And I put it, basically wrote the letter saying, I want to come in and I want to see what you're doing there.
That's great.
And
I love that.
I totally forgot after about a week that I had sent this thing. And about a month later, the phone rings. And my mom picks it up and she's like, it's some guy wanting to talk to you. And
you're how old at this time?
I was 15 at the time.
Wow, man. That's pretty cool that you did that at 15.
Yeah. And so I pick up the phone and I recognize the voice on the other end immediately as the guy that was the afternoon show guy on the radio. And talked to him for a couple of minutes. And he's like, well, we don't have a job for you. We can't pay you. But if you want to come in and see what's going on here, feel free. So I went in and watched the guy do his show and how they pulled music off the walls and how the whole thing worked, and was immediately fascinated by how radio worked. And I didn't go away. I think they were eventually expecting me to be like, okay, I'm bored and move on with my life. But I kept on going in and kept on going in. After about 6 months, they finally were like, he's not going away.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to find something for him to do.
Yeah.
And they actually were able to find a small little thing that would pay me to come in, and it was called board opping for high school football.
Yeah,
they would do their high school football and basketball games, and I would be at the radio station taking the phones and mixing it all together and making it happen. And so ultimately that was my break into the broadcast world, and spent 4.5 years at that radio station. And then we just sort of progressed into other avenues. Yeah.
I love that, man. And you know what? That story is the story of that's how you did it. You know, I got into the recording studio business a little kind of at the end of that era of that way of doing things, just kind of just showing up and never going away. But that is how you did it. You had to show up and you had to be willing to, I mean, I don't know what level of errands they had you doing there, but yeah, you like, you know, in order to get into a recording studio, you'd have to, like, you know, I've heard stories of people waiting outside, you know, just standing out there for days and being willing to, you know, just clean up, run and get food, run and get coffee, all that stuff. And that's how you, that was just standard. That was just the standard way to get in at that time.
Yep.
And you did that without even knowing it. You just were that dedicated. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it was a great, and it's kind of funny, the way we started things with the whole Aries being on a journey. I was on a journey. I wanted to know how things worked there, and eventually I was not going to let that journey end, and it just sort of led to other things. You are
a very, very busy guy.
Yeah.
You do a lot. In fact, the way we set this up was you posted on LinkedIn that you have like a week off, and that's like, and that is too much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, what do you do when you are not working?
I come from a sports environment. I will watch sports. I will sort of prepare and get ready for things that are coming up in the future, project wise, gig wise. I'm not the sort of person that sits still for very long.
Yeah.
Of course, family is a thing too.
Of course.
And fiance Amy and Olivia and Kyler, I sometimes will take them to sporting events, and they'll go to things. My 11-year-old daughter, she loves sports. She loves coming to work with me and hanging out and going to these events, to the point of where
Have I met her? Is she the one I met the other day at Aces?
Little redhead, blonde-haired kid
sweet.
that was right next
Lovely.
to me.
Yeah.
But she'll go to these games and places with me. And we had a parent-teacher conference at her school. We moved about 2 years ago to the other side of town, and so it was a brand new school. And go meet the teacher, and the teacher I walk in and sit down, and the teacher's like, "I'm really glad that you're here." I'm like, well, that's an interesting way to lead into this
that's
conversation.
A start, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, I'm happy to be here as well. And she's like, the reason is this: you were talked about a lot around here. Because she talks about going to these games and going to Golden Knights games and being on the Las Vegas Strip for the Aces victory parade, so on and so forth.
Hell yeah. How cool, man. How cool as a kid. Oh, man.
I don't understand what exactly it is you do. Because it is tough to explain what we do from a production aspect to someone who is not in that environment. Heck, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I have some family members that still don't fully grasp what it is I do on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, welcome to, I mean, I usually be welcoming me to that. Yeah. That's been my whole life. My whole life. No one knows what I do. They're like, oh yeah, it's something with cameras, right? Like it's video or something? Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's like, yeah, no one understands. I don't know why it's so hard to understand for people, but apparently it is very hard for people to understand.
It is difficult and tough for people to understand. And this became, for myself, evidently clear when we did the Aces victory parade on Las Vegas Boulevard in front of the Bellagio. And that, honestly, that was probably one of the most surreal, bizarre events that I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah, because they shut down Las Vegas Boulevard in front of the Bellagio.
Yes.
And we were sitting, seriously, in the middle of the street.
This is 2022?
This is the first one.
The first one.
Yeah.
I was there for that.
Yeah. We were sitting in the middle of Las Vegas Boulevard. Our broadcast setup was there.
Yeah.
And I'm facing the Bellagio fountains, getting ready to do our show, and there's people sitting behind me eating lunch at the little restaurant they have at the Paris Hotel, and they're watching us do things.
The Alexa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the parade happened.
Just to place this for you if you're watching.
Yeah. And then the parade happened, and we were not ready for what the reception was there. Security was not that great.
Yeah.
And eventually they closed the other side of Las Vegas Boulevard. At one point, one side was closed and the other side was open. But then eventually there were so many people there, they had to close down the other side. And so I was directing the show, so calling the cameras, the graphics, and all the stuff that you were seeing on the screens on the boards. And I seriously had 50 people standing behind me watching what was going on because they had never seen something like this happen before.
That's actually really cool, man.
Yeah, and I it was cool, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't like the fact that there's nobody back there watching my back.
Yeah,
because eventually, and sometimes weird things happen.
Yeah, it's not like you could just get up and whatever, defend yourself or anything, because you have to, if you don't understand that why that's nerve-wracking. It's like he can't stop doing what he's doing. He has to be intently focused on the screens and calling the show. There's no looking over your shoulder. There's no getting up. There's no nothing. That's like, there's no break.
Yeah.
So
perfect example was the players were on the platform, and we were going through intros and stuff like that. And I had all these people standing behind me, and Olivia and Amy were there with me as well. And this one woman was back there, and she was just yelling, "Sir, sir, sir."
Oh, that's
sir.
My favorite.
And
camera guy. Hey, camera guy.
And I knew that she was trying to get my attention. But number one, I'm in the middle of a really intense production.
Yeah.
Doing something and trying to pay attention to what I'm doing. I, number one, don't want to turn around and see what exactly is going on behind me.
Right.
because that would just be nerve-wracking. Number two, I don't want to acknowledge this woman, because if I acknowledge her, then suddenly I'm going to get drawn into whatever. So Amy,
and also it's not like you could turn around and then
and
have a
discussion.
conversation.
Exactly.
Right.
And so Amy was there with me, and finally she had enough, and she went up to the woman and she's like, "He's working. Can I help you?" And the woman is like,
great, man.
I wanted to know if they've already introduced Kelsey Plum on stage.
Lady, lady, look around, hey, or maybe ask someone else.
Yeah.
That's not busy.
Yeah.
Looking at screens and stuff,
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? Ask the person next to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What the hell?
So
That's
it was
great, man.
It was nerve-wracking. It was interesting. It was bizarre. It was a blast.
Shout out to her.
Yeah.
What awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's
it was
great.
very different. It was very unique and an interesting environment to be in. And and again, we're doing stuff that people don't see.
Yeah.
And they're not recognizing what's going on and understanding what it is we do. And so it was both annoying and sort of funny.
Yeah.
At the same time.
I mean, damn, great TD story.
Yeah.
That's a great TD story.
Yeah.
So you are more often than not the TD.
Yeah.
At Henderson Silver Knights, at Las Vegas Aces, at Golden Knights, etc. Is that exciting?
It is exciting. I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy the stress that sometimes comes with it. The chaos that surrounds the position sometimes is a bit overwhelming. But when you get done with the show and realize, wow, I came out on the other side of that in one piece and everybody's alive, you feel good about it.
Yeah.
In some situations, I'm TD, technical directing / directing, especially with our stuff at Henderson and the Aces. Actually, at Aces now, they've moved me into more of a director mode, where I have someone operating the switcher, because it was becoming too overwhelming with trying to do it all with one person and communicate with the camera operators and put together the show. So in some situations, I'm switching and calling the show. In other situations, like what I do with the Raiders, I'm directing the shows out there.
Yeah.
And I have a TD and have my graphics operator and replay operator and all that. I'm just there calling the shots and trying to put the whole thing together.
I have said, I think I said this to Matt, and obviously, no offense to the other TDs that I work with, and I'm sure they wouldn't, because you are the most experienced out of anyone that I work with. When you are on, I never am worried about if something goes left, because you are a master at pivoting and and like kind of patching stuff together and making it work and getting through it and making it, you're on it and it's going to be totally fine. Mm-hmm. That's your thing.
Yeah. And that's part of the nature of live production and live sports. You can have a script, you can have a plan, but frequently you throw that out and you ad lib and you make it up on the fly a little bit. And
very, very frequently.
Yeah.
Very frequently.
And I do my best to keep my cool and communicate and make it clear to people that are in a supporting role, whether it be a camera operator, whether it be a clips operator, replay operator, or whatever. My job is to try to bring everybody together and make it happen. And sometimes you do have to ad lib. Sometimes you do have to make it up on the fly. I love the pressure and the stress to a point. There's some days when I'm just like, what am I doing? What am I doing to myself? And we have a great group of individuals here in this town that also are our switcher operators, directors, and I was more than happy when I came here 3 years ago to be able to jump in with them and get involved. I think one of the most nerve-wracking moments was probably when I'm I would consider myself maybe a secondary or maybe a third string TD out at Vegas Golden Knights, where Ron was not available, our main guy, for the Stanley Cup banner raising. And I was on a switcher that I was not all that familiar with, doing a show that I had done a few, but not that many shows with.
And a very important show.
And here I am doing a show, understanding full well what the importance is of this show. A lot of people putting a lot of time and a lot of effort into making this a special night for the players, for the fans, for the workers as well. And I'm being put on this piece of machinery where if I do something wrong, it's very evident that something has gone wrong.
Yeah.
One wrong button can make a lot of very bad things occur. And I'm sitting in this chair about ready to do one of the biggest shows that T-Mobile Arena and the Golden Knights had done before. And so that was stressful.
Yeah.
And at the end of the night, I slept very well because it was a couple days worth of buildup and rehearsals and practice and thinking about what was going to happen. Then it was finally done. And I'm like, we made it.
Yeah, made it. And Emmy Award-winning show.
Yeah. And
Emmy Award-winning show.
It was great. You've had Jeff Chavez here.
Beast.
Yeah, great.
True beast.
Great director. Keeps his head on straight. Does not get flustered.
No.
I think I'll tell a story about that night. We'd gone through so many rehearsals and so many just over and over and over again because everything had to be perfect. And we are about 90 seconds away from the opening ceremonies and the show officially starting. And the last 90 to 60 seconds of going into a production can be very nerve-wracking because you've done all your prep work. You think you've done all your prep work. You think you have all your ducks in a row, and you're just running through all these things in your head. Did we do this? Did we practice this? Could this go wrong? So we're about 90 seconds away from the show starting. All of a sudden, our entire monitor wall in front of us goes black.
Oh, no.
And
No.
and it starts to freak out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because thinking, number one, we didn't rehearse this.
Right.
Who's going to rehearse an entire monitor wall going dead?
Right.
90 seconds before one of the biggest shows in the history of a franchise is to occur.
That was the banner raising night that happened?
Yes.
You're fucking kidding me.
Yeah. So the entire monitor wall went dead. And thankfully it came back after about 20, 25 seconds. But starting to think through, and I'm sort of green on this switcher. I'm okay with it, but I'm thinking to myself, we're going to have to do this with an entirely dead monitor wall, pushing buttons and hoping we do the right thing.
Yeah. That's not going to go well. You might get through it, but it's not going to go well.
So, but again, it's just part of the live production experience where sometimes things go sideways and you have to be ready to run with it. Yeah,
man. That's, I love that. Man, I can't imagine how how deep down in everyone, like in your stomach, your heart is in that moment when that's going on. I cannot imagine that. That almost makes me like, I get nervous every game.
Mm-hmm.
Every game. Doesn't matter if it's a regular ass game. Doesn't matter if it's a minor league thing, a big league thing. I get nervous every game because it's like, I want to do a good job.
Yeah.
I think, and that's the thing I love about working for Foley is that is the commonality, I think, between all of us. We all want to do a good job, and we all care about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's great. And I love that. So you worked for the NBA, Seattle Supersonics, for years. How many years?
I was with the Sonics. Basically, I worked in Key Arena, which was the home of the Seattle Supersonics, for 15 years in Seattle. I was with the Sonics from basically about 2002 to when they departed. So about 7 years. I was with the Seattle Storm, the WNBA team, for basically 13, 14 years up there.
Oh, okay. So with the Storm too, I did not realize that.
Yeah.
So So that is perfect. That's a segue right into what I was going to ask, which is, what do you feel is a notable change moving from the NBA to the WNBA, other than the obvious?
The WNBA, when it started, all the teams were supported by an NBA team. It was sort of the standard thing. A NBA team had to own a WNBA team because that was how the league sort of envisioned the league growing. Eventually, they broke away from that model, and independent owners started to be able to own WNBA franchises, and they broke away from the NBA standard.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
And so
good to know.
I think that the WNBA stopped being a secondary thought to more of a primary thought, because it wasn't the little sister of the NBA. It sort of helped the league gain legitimacy, because they were independent and running their own shows and doing their own things. And still, some of the teams were still operated and owned by the NBA owners, but you started to see more and more teams that were independent. And I think that has over time allowed the league to not be envisioned as NBA 2.0, but to be a legitimate competition.
Yeah.
I've watched these women play and have been around women's basketball in the WNBA for years, and I'm thrilled at the fact that you're seeing all these players and all these personalities and people that deserve to be featured and recognized for their skills, for their talent, for their personalities. And it's not how things were early on.
No, not up until very recently, actually.
Yeah. We are in a very good situation here in Vegas with the fact that all of our home games are sold out. First time a WNBA franchise has ever done that as far as regular season is concerned. We've got 19,000 sold for Caitlin Clark's game at T-Mobile Arena next week. And so we work hard to put on a show that will, number one, entertain the fans off the court, as well as the players entertaining the fans on the court.
Yeah.
We work together. They do their thing, we do our thing, and we put together a great show and we entertain the people. And so, but we've got a group with our WNBA franchise that has put time, money, effort into making the show what it is, and we've got a pretty good production here.
It's a damn good show, man.
Yeah,
no doubt about that. There's just nothing to say about it. It's a damn good show.
It is.
So you have to pardon my ignorance. I never was the biggest follower of the NBA until I started working in the NBA. Or with the NBA. So I have a special request that I was told to ask of you.
Sure.
If you have any stories, any Gary Payton or Sean Kemp stories.
I do not have any Gary Payton or Sean Kemp stories. I do have a semi-inappropriate story.
Okay.
Which I'm hesitant to tell, but I will tell it because I've told it before and it generally entertains people. One of the things that I used to do with the Seattle Supersonics was early in my time with the Sonics was the NBA officials would have their locker room.
Yeah.
And they would get a video feed of the broadcast of our in-house cameras, so on and so forth. And so when the game goes into halftime or whatever, whoever it is in the NBA office would get a hold of the referees and say, review this play or review this at this time in the game clock. And they would call up whatever time it was on the game clock and review the play and, okay, explain why you did this, why you did that. they're being watched and reviewed and asked, okay, why did you do that during halftime?
The refs were.
Yeah, the referees.
Okay.
And so
by the team.
By NBA, the league office.
Okay.
So their boss, the official's boss, would say, could you just sort of clarify what happened here?
Right.
During breaks or during halftime and stuff. So my job was to take care of the officials and make sure that everything was okay in their room. And if there were special requests or whatever, make sure it got done.
Yeah.
So there was a gentleman, his name, Dick Bavetta.
Okay.
He is a NBA legend as far as officiating is concerned. He's very, very personable, he's a longtime Hall of Famer as far as officials are concerned. So the officials came in and they traveled with these hard drives. And I, at the end of the night, dump all the stuff onto their hard drives. They take the hard drives onto the airplane. They can review whatever it is on the airplane ride and get.
Man, how much data was on those hard drives at that time?
So they would give me the hard drives. And on one particular day, Bavetta and his crew came in and I got the hard drive from Dick Bavetta and I connected the hard drive to the computer and the hard drive was making a clicking sound. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem right. So I took one of the other officials' hard drive, connected his, it was fine. Took the third official, his was fine. So plugged Bavetta's hard drive back in and it was still clicking. I'm like, hey, Dick, where were you guys before you came here? He's like, well, we just came from Phoenix. I'm like, okay. Did the guys in Phoenix say anything to you about your hard drive being defective or starting to freak out?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I hadn't had any problems with it. And I'm like, okay, well, let me see if I can do something with it. So I'm sitting there messing around, trying to format the drive and stuff. And then all of a sudden, Bavetta is standing right behind me. And he leans in. And he's like, could that have something to do with the dirty movies I have on there? And here I am.
Like, no, dumbass.
I'm starting to freak out. I'm starting to panic.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea how to respond to that.
Yeah.
And he watches me stew for about 15 seconds. And then he throws an elbow at me. He's like, just kidding.
Yeah.
And I was bright red. And
That's great.
It was like, I appreciated the fact that they were comfortable enough to mess with me and to play with me. But the NBA folks, I've always had a deep appreciation for, and the people that I've worked with have been awesome. And I was just thinking a couple days ago, if it wasn't for basketball, I don't know where I'd be. Because although I've done hockey, although I've done football, although I've done some of the other sports, basketball is where most of my work has been, whether it be WNBA, whether it be NBA, whether it be college basketball, whether it be what I've been doing over in Africa with Basketball Africa League. But without basketball, who knows where I'd be right now.
Different.
Yeah.
Something different. Speaking of basketball, kind of being a very important, facet of your career. What is a dream? What is the dream gig? What is the Jeromy Felts dream job?
I don't really think I have a specific dream job. I think that, and that is part of the journey. If you are so focused on one particular thing, one particular goal, you become tunnel visioned and you lose sight of those other things that may be on the side that might ultimately be your destiny.
I totally agree with that, by the way.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. 100%.
Yeah. I spend 2.5 to 3 months a year, and it's the last 3 seasons over in Africa, working with Basketball Africa League. And did I ever envision myself doing that? No, not really. I think that when I started my career, I envisioned myself traveling and being on the road, when I started early in my career, I thought, you know what would be a lot of fun is working for a baseball team, Major League Baseball team, whether it be a broadcast crew or whatever, and going on the road.
Yeah.
And seeing places and traveling to these different stadiums and so on and so forth. But I ended up sort of in Seattle, sort of pigeonholing myself into a studio environment, sort of a news environment. We did post-game shows and pre-game shows for the Mariners in our studio, and then we had the crew out at the stadium doing the broadcasts. And
well, you were baseball adjacent,
yeah,
at least.
So I was there, but I wasn't going somewhere. Yeah. I was at home while everybody else was doing stuff on the road. I sort of envisioned myself being on the road and seeing the world and experiencing things and going places. And even though it didn't happen immediately through Major League Baseball, it's happened later on in my career. I've gone on international trips. I've gone to Shanghai, China. I've gone to Africa. I've gone to Berlin. I've gone all these places. My passport is full of stamps of these different places that I've been able to go to. And the job, the work, is what has facilitated those experiences. So I think the ultimate dream job, I'm kind of living it. I'm on the road sometimes. I'm seeing things. I'm experiencing things. And I'm not, because it is a great big world out there. We don't really see it. We don't really think about it when you're here in the United States, but there's so much out there and so many places to go and places to see. And thankfully, I've had a chance to do a lot of those things. And who knows what may be in the future.
What makes a great TD, Jeromy?
Keeping your cool. You cannot freak out. If you freak out, everybody else freaks out.
Fucking right. I have to bleep that, but
yeah.
Fucking
right. If you are able to keep your cool even when it's all falling apart around you, you're still going to be in a better position than if it's all falling apart and you're falling apart, because you are not going to recover from that. Something I've learned early on in my career is mistakes happen. Stuff goes wrong. You can't fix it. You can't go back in time. You can't solve that problem. But if you focus too much on that thing that went wrong, you're setting yourself for 5 more things that are going to go wrong. You need to be quick on erasing those memories and moving on and being like, I'll deal with it later. I'll think about it later. Right now, I just need to blow that out and move on with my day. Because it is one of those things where you do have to be very mentally engaged in what you're doing and focused on what you're doing. Because again, if you just lose that moment of focus, you're bound to make another mistake.
So domino effect.
Yeah.
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 Well, that was great. That's a great quote. All right, man. I got one more thing for you.
Sure. Fire away.
So the story you told about the radio station, I can't tell you how much I love that, because that is like in the lexicon of like the career I came up in, which was recording studio. Mm-hmm. That is like part of that. So I think anybody coming up should like listen to that and like really, really dial into that, like that dedication, that like obsession. But aside, for young people who may admire you, who may want to be a TD for a NBA, WNBA team, NFL team, sometime in their career, what do you say to them?
Be willing to learn. Be willing to start small. Because what people don't realize and understand is there is so much going on in our environment that leads up to where we are. There's so many people behind the scenes that are organizing things, and stagehands that are making sure that everything is in the right place. We have our people that have to manage graphics, build graphics, and keep the show organized, because it doesn't happen just like that. There's a lot of people that are behind the scenes making this happen. I will say this about, again, my 11-year-old. She'll go to these games with me, and she observes what's going on and seeing how things are going behind the scenes. Like I'll take her to an Aces game, and when the arena doesn't have people in it, she'll want to be on the switcher, pushing buttons and making things happen. And then we would go down to grab a bite to eat, and then we'd come back, and she would want to jump back on the switcher with the arena doors open. And I'm like, well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Well, because the doors are open and people are inside. So
yeah,
she's pretty confident that she could do my job. And
great.
she's getting to the point of where she might be able to. I sort of envision her getting involved in this industry because, again, she's seeing things from a different perspective. There was one Aces game where she couldn't go to the game because she was feeling ill.
Yeah.
But she was at home sitting in my recliner watching the Aces game on TV. And she was sitting there, and my fiance Amy was there with me, and she was explaining to me through messaging that Olivia was sitting there explaining, okay, so the rabbit mascot is over here, the trampoline is over here. When this happens, Joe, the MC, is going to come running out and do this thing. And she was explaining step by step what was going on behind the scenes because she was paying that close of attention to what was going on. And she would do the same thing at Golden Knights games. She would see the castle light up. Oh, they're about to do something over there. They're starting to set something up over there. The things that we try to do in quiet behind the scenes to not draw attention to it. But she was seeing all these things.
Dialed in, man.
Yeah. And so it's paying attention, having an eye for detail, and being willing to learn and observe and catch those little things. And it can be a little overwhelming, but after a while it makes sense. So for someone who's just starting to get involved, be a utility, be a cable runner, someone that follows behind the camera guys. Yes, it's not glorious, but it's a necessary part of the whole thing, and that will lead to something else.
Shit, I fucking love working utility, man.
Mm-hmm.
I go to, I'm watching the game courtside and getting paid.
Yeah,
like that's sure, like I'll run cable for a camera, like no problem. I have no problem with that. I love it.
And I've basically with Olivia, she'll start off as part of the game presentation team. She'll be one of those individuals that stage manages or is running around trying to organize things or gather things and stuff like that, because that's how you get involved. That's how you start.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's how you grow.
Yeah.
And so it really is a great industry and a great business to be in. And I've had a lot of jobs that were a lot worse than our most stressful days.
Yeah.
Doing these.
Yeah. No kidding, man. And she's cut from a fine cloth, so I'm sure she's going to do great, brother.
Yep.
Jeromy, is there if you'd like to share your socials, or if there's anything you're working on that you'd like people to check out, please do.
Definitely, we're looking forward to the NFL season. Do a lot of stuff with the Raiders and getting involved with our broadcasts over there. Of course, the Raiders and the Aces, and we're very busy around here, and that's one of the reasons why we also came to Vegas, is the fact that the sports industry here is growing.
Hell yeah.
Eventually we'll have a Major League Baseball team here. Eventually we'll have a NBA team here. And again, for individuals that might not have a huge piece of the action, I tell them there's going to be stuff coming here. There's going to be more movement and more growth here. And I relocated from Seattle 3 years ago, and there was a reason why we came here, because we knew that there was going to be growth and things happening. And I just jumped in feet first and got involved. Yeah, it's love this town. The heat was interesting, trying to adjust from Seattle to 115 degree temperatures.
You can't have everything.
Yeah, exactly. But I was definitely happy to get away from the rain.
Yeah.
Very, very happy to be involved in this community and with these folks and all the folks that help put on the shows, and lucky guy.
I love that, man.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did it. Yay.
Nice job.
Yes.